Walters is the place to be this time of year, across the street from Nationals Park and near Audi Field. Open daily from 11 a.m. until 2 a.m., and on the weekends, closing time is at 3 a.m.
Hear that? That's now Crispy and McCrispy Strips meeting Creamy Caesar Sauce. Sounds extra crispy. Caesar Sauce at McDonald's, for a limited time. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
It's hard seeing somebody like Foster go. It's hard seeing anybody go. But obviously with what Foster's meant to us.
It could have gone any basically number of paths. Like we could have extended him, we could have traded him, we could have just kept him. And he could have helped our team win down the stretch. And then, then we're faced with potentially offering him a qualifying offer at the end of the year and seeing how that goes. So we carefully considered all the different avenues here. And just at the end of the day, I thought that this was the best thing to do, but it was also the hardest thing to do because it was the one scenario where he wasn't going to be with our club, obviously.
2-2 pitch to Lile. Swinging a fly ball driven to right deep. De La Cruz back to the warning track, to the wall. He looks up and it is gone. And the Nationals have a 3-0 lead here in the second inning.
Cosgrove coming set with the toe taps. Now his pitch. Breaking ball hit in the air to left center field deep. This is way back. And there it goes. Derek Hill has done it again to the Nationals. He has just hit a grand slam home run. A hit batter, 2 walks and a grand slam, and the Phillies lead 4-3.
With Harper at the plate and nobody out. Beater to the plate. Harper launches one dead center and deep. Young on the go, way back, forget about it. That one into the bushes beyond the 401 mark and straightaway center. And the Phillies lead it 6-3.
And welcome to Nat Chat. I'm Al Galdi, host of the Al Galdi podcast. I'm joined by Washington Nationals insider Mark Zuckerman of NatsJournal.com. He is at Citizens Bank Park in Philadelphia. So the Washington Nationals losing streak now is at 6 games, a 6-3 loss at the Philadelphia Phillies on Monday evening in a game in which the Nats blew a 3-0 seventh-inning lead as we had yet another implosion by Nats relief pitching. The Nats in MLB's 2026 regular season now are 4 games below 500, 55 and 59, run differential now at plus 13. But the 2026 MLB trade deadline has passed, was on Monday at 6 p.m. Eastern, and 3 notable Nats trade candidates all ended up being dealt. Infielder Curtis Mead, gone. First baseman Luis Garcia Jr., gone. Starting pitcher Foster Griffin, gone. The Nats on Monday made 2 trades. The Nats on Monday evening announced having traded starting pitcher Foster Griffin to the Cleveland Guardians for 4 prospects. And the Nats on Monday evening announced having traded outfield prospect Christian Franklin to the Baltimore Orioles for relief pitching prospect Joe Galassi. And speaking of the Nats and Does, the Nats AA affiliate, the Harrisburg Senators, they on Tuesday evening begin a 6-game series at the Orioles AA affiliate, the Chesapeake Bay Sox. Yes, a 6-game series. That's how minor league baseball can work. Games Tuesday through Sunday for Harrisburg at Chesapeake, but a chance to see some good AA baseball. So a lot with the Nats happened on Monday, including Blake Butera being ejected for the first time as Nats manager. He on Monday evening in the top of the 7th got ejected by home plate umpire Manny Gonzalez for arguing that Nasim Nunez was interfered with as he tried to escape a rundown between third base and home plate. Nunez got tagged out, and yet another instance of the Nats being too aggressive on a contact play.
Home plate umpires yelling at Michael Johns, the bench coach, and Butera just got in between them.
Yep.
Butera's never been ejected, and now he has.
For all that happened with the Nats on Monday, Mark, how about a Blake Butera ejection being part of that mix? That was something.
It was, and look, I know he insisted afterwards that it was just isolated to that moment and really wasn't even the call. He said, though he didn't agree with the third base umpire's call, he understood at least the explanation for it.
Got an explanation from third base umpire, which I understood. Of course, didn't agree with, but understood. I thought he handled it very well.
What actually set Butera off was when the home plate umpire, Manny Gonzalez, was yelling at the Nats bench, who was upset about the call. And that's when he stepped in. And boy, he got his money's worth in that one. We always kind of wondered, did he have that in him to do something like that? Yeah, he did, especially when it was standing up for his own players. Now, he insisted that only had to do with that one play and there wasn't any broader frustration or meaning or anything to it. I'll just say, watching from afar and understanding what he and this team have gone through the last couple of weeks, and you finally hit it that trade deadline day, and now you traded away, as you said, their third key player, and maybe the best of them all, and the one that we felt like all along was on that borderline of, if you keep him, you're still going for it this year. If you trade him, you're acknowledging that it's time to move on to next year. It would not have surprised me if there were some more emotions inside of Blake Butera that all came out in that moment, and that it wasn't confined to the one play and the one call. I'll take him at his word, but he might not even realize that he probably had this thing building up in him for a little while.
Had some steam to blow off in this game on Monday evening, especially with what ended up happening with the Nats bullpen. Nats president of baseball operations, Paul Taboni, did a Zoom press conference on Monday evening. You'll be hearing sound from that spread out throughout this episode of the podcast. So I guess let's first start with sort of a bigger picture look at what happened here regarding this trade deadline. We wondered whether the Nats in this surprisingly successful season would be buyers, sellers, or a combination of the two. I would say that the truth is that the Nats ended up being more sellers than anything else. Paul Taboni, in the lead up to this deadline, made 4 trades. You look at each trade. One was a combination of selling and buying, the Curtis Mead trade, though I would argue that that was more selling than buying. Like if you had to pick one side, that was more sell side than buy side. You had 2 trades that were clear sell side trades, the Luis Garcia Jr. and Foster Griffin trades. And then you had the Kristen Franklin trade, which was, neither selling nor buying. But, for all of the talk about what would the Nats do, it certainly seems to me like they were more sellers than buyers when all was said and done. The other thing is that for all of the talk about the Nats needing to beef up the relief pitching, yes, some relievers have been acquired, but in terms of obvious immediate help for the bullpen at the major league level, I don't know that really got that from what the Nats did regarding this trade deadline. So I feel like those are 2 bigger picture takeaways from what the Nats did in the lead up to this deadline. More selling than buying, and the bullpen help that everyone has been begging for. Maybe it was achieved by some guys who were acquired, but there certainly were not any immediate, obvious relief pitchers who were acquired who you say, okay, that guy or those guys are going to be helping this team at the major league level. What do you make ultimately of how Taboni handled what the Nats did in the lead up to this trade deadline?
Yeah, I agree with your overall sentiment. This was a sell in the bigger picture, and they certainly did not go out and get established big league relievers, the kind that you would think you go get a rental guy to help get you through the rest of this season and hopefully get you over the hump. And I think what it really showed us, the Mead early trade, especially given where the team was at that point, where they were in the standings and how they were playing, I can buy the idea of that being both the buy and the sell. That you were, yes, trading away one of your most important offensive players, but you did so in order to get a pitcher who could help you now and who could help you in the future. And they're willing to sacrifice a little bit of offense to address what was obviously the most important need on the team. So that one I understood and could buy the argument of what that was, both a buy and a sell. Then what happened over the last week is they lost now 6 in a row. And I think we take Paul Taboni at his word. He said that he was going to let these final games over the last week help dictate what direction they were going to go, that he was willing to look in either direction.
I mean, it's tricky. Obviously, where we are in the standings will dictate the majority of it.
Now, I think he was probably focused more so on the long term than the short term all along, but he was willing to think more short term if they did have a good week leading into the deadline. By the time they got to Sunday and they're already spiraling and they're under 500 and they're staring up at a bunch of teams in front of them, now you go into full sell mode, and the Garcia trade is a sell and the Griffin trade is a sell.
Just looking backwards, we came onto a ton of pitching in these deals. Did we want to pursue it? Yeah, we wanted to pursue it to help this year's team. We wanted to pursue it to hopefully allow us to roll out a better pitching group in the future.
Now, they did, it seems like, go out of their way to acquire pitching across all these trades, and even specifically relief pitching. Now, a few of them have some big league experience, and we're going to see a few of them here soon and maybe over the rest of the year. For the most part, these are additions that I think they're thinking are going to help them next year and beyond. Most of the guys they got are upper level in the minors, AA, few AAA and big league, as opposed to the young guys in single A. So I do think there is the thought in their minds that they did some things that they think can help them next year. But you can't call that a buy if they're not established big leaguers who are trying to help you make the playoffs this year. And I think it's pretty clear that they are no longer prioritizing that. They can go out and play as hard as they want and say it's not over till it's over. But the actions of the front office over the last 48 hours, to me, it was pretty clear. They're saying, great job this year. We've made real progress. We're now trying to help fill our obvious holes we have with the idea of 2027 being a better team.
Yeah, and what Paul Taboni so clearly did was sell high on three guys who were having really good 2026 seasons. Curtis Mead, Luis Garcia Jr., Foster Griffin. I mean, ultimately, Taboni got these guys and said, okay, these guys are killing it this year. I'm going to sell high. That's what he did with each guy, decided not to retain any of them. You know, to what extent contract extensions were pursued with Griffin and Garcia, hard to say. I thought it was interesting, the exchange that you had with Taboni on Monday evening regarding the pursuit of an extension with Griffin. I'm going to tell you what I took from that because I want to hear what you said, but I don't want to be spoiled by what you say. What I took from Taboni's answer was, we pursued, but Griffin was not necessarily receiving what we were trying to do here. That, you know, we were interested in an extension, but Foster Griffin wasn't necessarily interested in an extension.
There was just a clear desire to want him around. Having said that, like you can't just always get something done. There were a lot of factors at play here. Obviously, Foster and what he wants, what makes sense for the Nationals, but then also within like what makes sense for the Nationals, we have to balance it against the trade market. And we were happy about the return that came back for him, which once again just makes it a kind of a tricky situation to balance all the different things in the equation.
That's what I got listening between the lines to what Taboni said in response to what you asked. What did you think about what he said?
I felt the same way. And honestly, even before he ever said that, I sensed that was probably the most likely scenario for how this would play out. Of course, the Nationals were interested in retaining him and, would have loved to get him to agree to something. But if you are Foster Griffin, as we've outlined several times in recent weeks, it's a hard thing to convince you that it makes sense to agree to an extension right now when you're this close to free agency, coming off this remarkable comeback season from Japan, where now you're going to have 30 teams bidding for your services. So I don't think we should be surprised that the Nats were more motivated to try to do something now than Griffin was. Now, the great unknown is what exactly did they offer him? How serious was the offer? We'll never know that, other than Taboni was asked a question, I think, about the financial flexibility. It wasn't straight up like, were you given enough to offer him? But he essentially said that he was not constrained in any way in what he could offer Griffin based on what they're trying to project for down the road, other deals and salaries and all that kind of stuff.
We were comfortable to, roll the dice and having Foster here through the rest of the year without an extension and potentially considering that. Having said that, I think a lot of what happens over the course of the next 2 months would have dictated, right, whether like Foster was going to receive a QO, and then it's up to him, like whether he wants to accept it or not and kind of what comes with that.
We don't know what they offered him, but it was pretty clear that, yeah, they tried. And Griffin, as was his right, said, I like you guys. Maybe I would want to return, but I'm 2 months away from the one chance I'm ever going to get to cash in as a free agent in the major leagues. I've got to go for that.
Yeah, and that's why I say when we talk about like the extent to which the Nats pursued an extension, did they ever make him a true, legitimate, compelling offer or not? We just don't know that. It's funny because what came up not that long ago was like, hey, would you do 3 years, $15 million per year for Griffin? And that horse left the barn weeks ago. Like that was something you could have maybe done in May. By the time we got to July, maybe even June, like, sorry, the toothpaste was out of the tube on that. Like you really needed to make a substantial offer in order to get him to sign an extension. And that obviously did not happen. The return for Foster Griffin, starting pitching prospect Josh Hartle, who at the time of the trade was the Guardians' number 25 overall prospect per MLB Pipeline. Relief pitching prospect Will Dion, relief pitching prospect Ken Douglas Bjergwes, and outfield prospect Nick Mitchell. What do you make of the return that the Nats got for Foster Griffin?
I'm going to lump this in with the Luis Garcia Jr. trade and say, whether it was by design or not, it sure felt like they were prioritizing quantity over quality. 4 guys for 1 player. They did that twice now. And in both cases, you didn't have that one clear-cut best prospect out of the group. In this case, it's only one top 30 prospect that they got for Griffin. Now, that doesn't mean these can't still turn into good players who help them in both the short and the long term. And maybe that's just honestly the best you can expect for a 2-month rental of an unproven starting pitcher. So I get that it's easy for us to say, hey, go after a bigger name and just ask for 2 prospects instead of 4. But that's easier said than done. It all depends on what the other team is willing to give up. So I think in a perfect world, I would rather have seen a higher end prospect and maybe fewer total players in return. But I can understand why that's not as simple to take place as possible. But I did think it was notable. The 2 things that stood out about what they got across all 3 of these trades, they got quantity and they got a lot of pitching. And I do think there was some design behind all of that, understanding where their organizational needs are. Now we'll wait and see. Like I said, there are several of these relievers who we should see in the big leagues, some of them soon, some of them maybe before the end of the year, several others maybe sometime next year. So this may not be a 3-year wait for us to find out whether they've made good on these trades or not. But definitely some pitching and a quantity of pitching, not just quality of pitching.
Yeah, the Nats over the 4 trades get 9 pitchers. So really an infusion of pitching into the Nats organization. It's been interesting reading the reactions of Nats fans to what the team did regarding this trade deadline. And, there are 2 schools of thought, right? One is that in Paul Taboni, we trust this guy so far has done an exemplary job. And, we're going to sort of follow his lead on what was best for this team to do regarding this deadline. On the other hand, the rebuild fatigue, which I get, we've talked about it a bunch. Here you have the Nats once again being a seller regarding a trade deadline. The team is in postseason contention this season. There are some asterisks to that. We get that. But still, in a season in which there was at least legitimate conversation about the team buying, the team did not do that and, really did not come close to doing that. And there's a disappointment with that. I understand that. I mean, I know a lot of the responses I've gotten, and I'm sure you get the same thing. I'm tired of us trading away people. I'm tired of us selling. I'm tired of us not retaining our stars, et cetera, et cetera. And I get it. I mean, I do fall in the camp of I give Taboni a benefit of the doubt, assuming that everything that was done here was under what he wanted to do and not something that he was told to do by ownership, or, maybe he wanted to buy, but ownership wouldn't allow it. Assuming that none of that was the case, I'm going to follow Taboni's lead for now because I do think he gets a benefit of the doubt. I'm a big fan of the process that he's implemented here, but there is a frustration with this. And I know that there is a feeling of, hey, this team not that long ago was just a few games out of a playoff spot. Or if the team had bought sooner, because remember, weeks ago, the conversation was, hey, the relief pitching help that the Nats need, why not get it now to better position this team as we approach the trade deadline? That did not happen. And so if you're listening to this and you're frustrated by that, I get that. I mean, I totally understand that sentiment.
And there was a perfectly valid argument even going back to the offseason when they clearly did not do anything to address their bullpen. And I understand you can say, well, they weren't really expecting to contend this year. Well, you still do have to field a major league bullpen. And, they signed some free agents to fill a few gaps in the rotation and made some acquisitions for their lineup and their bench. And they really did almost nothing of consequence to the bullpen. You could see that coming. And so it's very easy to look at this and say, if they just had a couple of decent relievers from the beginning, what would their record have been here come August 3rd? And would they have been in a totally different position than they wound up? So that's valid. That is a valid argument to make. And as you said, there was a point 3 weeks ago, they could have been more aggressive and tried to do something to address it as well before the bottom kind of fell out. So these are all valid arguments. I think also there's a perfectly valid argument that is, when you handed over the organization to this new president of baseball operations and a completely new front office and coaching staff, the mission there was clear. You are supposed to remake the entire organization and build something that can be sustainable for a long time. And that requires looking at the long-term view more than the short-term view. And so even though the team outperformed expectations in the first half of the season, that shouldn't necessarily alter your greater vision for what you're trying to do here. And so I think they did what they probably thought they were going to do all along. The fascinating question, again, we'll never really know, but let's say they did have a good week leading up to the deadline. Would it have been a totally different approach? If we're going to believe Taboni, I think they would have at least considered that, maybe even as little as just retaining Griffin, playing out the year, and then seeing what happened after that. But the performance of the team over the last week kind of sealed the deal and allowed Taboni to go back into what his original vision was all along.
Al Galdi here to tell you about Window Nation. But before that, the Window Nation look into the future.
And here in the 7th inning, it's the Major League debut of Will Dion. Dion is 26 years old and making his debut. The Louisiana native was the 9th-round pick back in 21. Andre Chaparro, a one-hopper to Pizzana, to Rocchio on to first, just like that, a double play. So Will Dion in his Major League debut with family here, wife Abby in attendance. What a debut for Will Dion as he throws up a scoreless 7th for the Guardians.
Hey, Al Galdi here for Window Nation. If you're using chat to research your next home improvement project, forget the prompts. We've got all the details on a company that you can trust. For replacement windows and doors without the hassle, just look up Window Nation. Window Nation is the real deal. Homeowners across the country love the one-day installation process, especially since Window Nation installers leave your home cleaner than when they started. And this month, you can get 50% off all window styles, plus 0 down, 0 interest, and no payments for 2 years. That's a lot of savings on top of quality windows and doors. 866-90NATION or windownation.com, and tell Window Nation that you want the deal that you heard about from Al Galdi on the Nats Chat podcast. Window Nation, the real deal when it comes to replacement windows and doors. 866-90NATION, windownation.com, and tell Window Nation that you want the deal that you heard about from Al Galdi on the Nats Chat podcast.
Imagine buying your kid a toy only to find the batteries aren't included, or buying furniture but missing the tools to build it. Frustrating, right? Now imagine the exact same feeling, but you're paying way more. That is what buying business software usually feels like. Fragmented, disconnected, and incredibly expensive. Odoo completely changes that. Odoo is a complete, fully integrated business suite where all your apps actually talk to each other. We're talking automated lead routing for your sales team, seamless AI integration, and intuitive point-and-click website builder. It's everything your business needs to scale, saving you time, headaches, and money. Stop piecing your software together. Go to odoo.com. That's odoo.com to learn more.
If you're like me, you're the kid who savored every last drop of sugary milk at the bottom of your cereal bowl while watching Saturday morning cartoons. Kachava's new flavor, Cinnamon French Toast, gives you a bit of that classic nostalgia. And I love that it's made with real cinnamon bark. It's a comfort flavor, but with benefits and without the sugary drawbacks. There's no artificial colors, flavors, or sweeteners. It's non-GMO, there's no soy, there's no animal products, no gluten, and no preservatives. But Kachava does provide all the nutrition your body craves in one deliciously simple shake with just 2 scoops. So treat yourself to a childhood favorite. Go to Kachava.com and use code SPORTS for 15% off your first order. That's Kachava, Kachava.com with code SPORTS.
1 ball, 2 strikes, 2 outs. Duran to the belt. He kicks and fires. Check swing, pitches up and away. It's going to be challenged by the catcher Stubbs. Fastball at 102.
The catcher is challenging.
We'll see if the game ends on a replay challenge. We'll look out at the video board, and the game is over. Stubbs raises his arms to the sky. A fastball at 102, overturned to strike 3. And the Nationals suffer their 6th consecutive loss, their longest losing streak this year.
It is amazing how poorly this road trip is going. I mean, we talked up the significance of this road trip, how big this road trip is. 8-game road trip comprised of 2 4-game series against the top 2 teams in the National League East. And the Nats so far are 0-5 on this road trip. This past Thursday through Sunday, swept in 4 games at the NL East leading Atlanta Braves. And now this 6-3 loss at the Philadelphia Phillies on Monday evening in game 1 of a 4-game series. Nats blow a 3-0 7th inning lead. It had been been a while since we had a bullpen implosion, but we certainly got that in this game. 3 Nats relievers officially combined to allow 4 runs in 1 2/3 innings. Tom Cosgrove officially allowed 2 runs in 2/3 of an inning, came into the game in the bottom of the 7th with runners on first and second, 1 out, and the Nats up 3-0. He, to the first batter he faced, issued a 1-out walk of Edmundo Sosa to load the bases, and Cosgrove, to the second batter he faced, gave up a grand slam, a 1-out grand slam by Derek Hill, who, boy, has become quite the Nats killer this season, to left field for a 4-3 Phillies lead. Clayton Beeter allowed 2 runs in a third of an inning. He, in the bottom of the 8th, issued a leadoff walk of ex-Nat Kyle Schwarber and then gave up a first-pitch 2-run homer by ex-Nat Bryce Harper on a moonshot to center field to put the Phillies up 6-3. The homer going a projected 433 feet per Statcast. And then we got Eddie Jean. He tossed 2/3 of a scoreless and hitless inning, though he, in the bottom of the 8th, to the first batter he faced, Brian De La Cruz, issued a 1-out first pitch hit by pitch. And the Nats on Monday night announced having optioned Jean to AAA Rochester. It's almost like the baseball gods were speaking to the Nats of, hey, you guys didn't do enough for your bullpen when it came to this trade deadline, and this is what's going to happen to you. You know, a stiff reminder of the bullpen still being a problem. You know, this took you right back to that series the Nats had with the Phillies a few weeks ago, a series in which the bullpen was wretched. The bullpen in this game, just terrible, completely undoing what the Nats had going with that 3-0 7th inning lead.
Total carbon copy of what we saw in that 4-game series, which of course included 3 consecutive blown saves and the Phillies taking the lead in the 9th inning on a home run in 3 consecutive games. And this wasn't the 9th inning, it was the 7th, but it sure felt all too familiar, with Derek Hill having a starring role and Bryce Harper having a starring role. And I couldn't have been the only one that, as that 7th inning was playing out, thought to myself, this is where it's all going to come apart, right? You could just feel it happening. Andrew Alvarez pitched maybe his best game yet in the big leagues, but then he puts 2 guys on in the 7th with a hit by pitch and a walk. Now Michael Johns, who's filling in as the bench coach, filling in for Blake Butera after the ejection, goes to the bullpen, brings in Cosgrove. He walks the first batter he faces. Now the bases are loaded. You can't tell me you didn't have a pretty good idea what was about to happen. And sure enough, Derek Hill grand slam, and then the Harper homer the next inning. They're tired of it. We're tired of it. It's the same story over and over. I would just say that for all the good things they've done this year and all the progress they've made, there's a really important next step for this group to overcome. And yes, part of that is just having better arms in the bullpen, but it's also having the ability to still control a game late against good opponents, not to let the moment become too big. We've talked about this, that like, yes, the bullpen often gives up the lead, but when's the last time the offense then came back and retook the lead or won the game late for them? It does feel like once it goes south, they are not able to get it back. And I think this is an important next step for this young group to learn how to close out games and even sometimes how to come back themselves when something does go wrong.
And they get a reliever who shows promise, and then he ends up not doing well. Like, he ends up being infected with the Nats' bad bullpenitis. Tom Cosgrove had done some good things, and now, you lump him in with everyone else with what happened in this game on Monday evening. The shame, too, is that the Nats wasted a good outing by Andrew Alvarez. The Nats did not go with a bullpen game for this game. The Nats on Monday morning announced having recalled Alvarez from AAA Rochester. He was the Nats starting pitcher for this game, and he did well. He officially allowed 2 runs in 6 1/3 innings, 5 strikeouts, gave up just 3 hits, all of which were singles, issued 3 walks and a hit by pitch, 81 pitches, 48 strikes, 33 balls, and the 2 runs charged to him came with him out of the game, came on the grand slam by Derek Hill off Tom Cosgrove. Now, you mentioned the Nats offense, and this is a significant item here. The offense has gone cold. The offense is in a rut right now. You look at the 6-game losing streak, a total of just 16 runs have been scored by the Nats. The Nats on Monday evening, just 3 runs, just 6 hits, 0 for 6 with runners in scoring position. So another bad game in the RISP department. The Nats struck out 10 times, did homer twice to go with 4 singles, did draw 3 walks. And one of the homers was by Abimelec Ortiz, your Luis Garcia Jr. replacement. Abimelec Ortiz, he is the Nats starting first baseman and number 2 batter, 1 for 3 with a solo homer, his first career MLB regular season home run.
The count full, Nola fires. Swinging a fly ball deep right field. This has got a chance, and it's the first big league home run for Abimelec Ortiz. And the Nationals have a 1-0 lead, 2 batters in.
Ortiz and the Nats, 1 run first, a 1-out full count solo shot to right field to put the Nats up 1-0 despite having been down at 1.12. The Nats on Monday afternoon announced having recalled Ortiz from AAA Rochester. Now, we just saw Ortiz a few weeks ago. July 12th, the Nats called him up and sent him back down the same day, but he and the Nats 5-3 loss to the New York Yankees at Nationals Park on that day. That was a Sunday. It was the Nats starting DH and number 3 batter, and he had an extra base hit in that game, 1 for 2 with a double in his MLB regular season debut. He can hit. He was obtained from the Texas Rangers as part of the 5 prospect package for starting pitcher MacKenzie Gore this past January. I love the fact that, he's just called up and he's in that number 2 spot, right? But what does he do? He homers. Blake Butera, when it comes to these lineup decisions, and I guess I should say the Nats baseball ops department, when it comes to these lineup decisions, it feels like throughout this season, they've made so many right calls. And here was another one, Abimelec Ortiz, number 2 spot, and the guy homers.
The whole idea here is that they're trying to tell him, you don't have to actually replace Luis Garcia Jr. We're not expecting you to do that. Well, what do? They put him at first base. They put him in the number 2 spot, and he homers in the first inning. That was straight out of Luis Garcia's playbook. Garcia, by the way, did you see, homered for the Yankees in his debut, a big game flipping homer in the 7th, although they then blew that lead and the Cardinals came back against them. But what a moment for Louis in his first game at Yankee Stadium. This felt like a Luis Garcia first inning, pull the ball to right field home run. And the smile on Ortiz's face was huge as he rounded the bases for the first time with a big league home run. This is a talented hitter and slugger. That's his profile, who they obviously, he wasn't the number 1 guy they got in the Gore trade, but he was highly thought of enough that they wanted him in there, and they knew that he was the one that was closest to big league ready out of that whole bunch. He's had a good year at AAA. I think there is a belief within the organization that while they can't just count on him reproducing Garcia's numbers, that they can help mold him into a good big league hitter, big league slugger, and to be the left-handed portion of a platoon at first base now with Andres Chaparro. Early impression? Yeah, he sure looks like he could do that. A long way to go, and we'll see as pitchers start to see him more and how they do. But it was shaping up there for a little while to be a really feel-good night for them, in large part because the guy who was replacing the big name who was traded on Sunday had come through in a very similar fashion.
Yeah, and I do think this is a big item to be thinking about when it comes to the Nats having traded Curtis Mead and Luis Garcia Jr. To what extent is there an organizational thinking of, we with our process can make another Curtis Mead and another Luis Garcia Jr., and maybe Abimelec Ortiz is a part of that thought process.
Hey, it's Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. Now, I was looking for fun ways to tell you that Mint's offer of unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month is back. So I thought it would be fun if we made $15 bills. But it turns out that's very illegal. So there goes my big idea for the commercial. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3 months, $90 for 6 months, or $180 for 12-month plan required. $15 per month equivalent. Taxes and fees extra. Initial plan term only. Greater than 50 gigabytes may slow when network is busy. See terms.
Hear that? That's now Crispy and McCrispy strips meeting creamy Caesar sauce. Sounds extra crispy. Caesar sauce at McDonald's for a limited time. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
Left side of the infield, shaded well up the middle with Abrams. And the third baseman, B-Boss. Nunez straight up on the right side of the pitch. Swinging a ground ball toward Nunez. To his left, he's on the outfield grass. He has it. An easy play. And the throw to Ortiz at first, and the inning's over. 6 scoreless innings for Andrew Alvarez. A walk and a man left for the Phillies. And we've played 6 in Philadelphia.
Daylen Lile homered. He was the Nats starting left fielder and number 6 batter, 1 for 4 with a 2-run homer. Lile in the Nats 2-run second had a 2-run homer to right field for a 3-0 Nats lead despite having been down at 1.02. The Nats were up 3-0. This was looking like a Nats win. I was all ready to go with you to talk about the end of the losing streak, and that did not happen. C.J. Abrams was the Nats starting shortstop and number 4 batter, 0 for 4 with 3 strikeouts. Did have a stolen base. And he on Monday morning was named National League Player of the Month for the month of July. So congrats to him. Obviously had a tremendous month. Also, James Wood, you noted this, that he is to undergo an MRI on Tuesday off hurting his left side on a swing in the 6th inning. I guess we don't know much more than that.
No, we did talk to him afterwards, and he said that he felt it on that last swing. He described it in the oblique/side area.
I feel fine. We'll see how it goes tomorrow. But I just felt some like oblique side area on the last swing.
I asked him, have you ever dealt with anything like that before? He said, no, not in that area. So he doesn't really know what to compare it to know if it's anything serious or not. He went out and played another inning in the field, and he said everything was fine there. But then when he came back to the dugout, he went to the tunnel and tried to take a couple of swings to see if there was any lingering issue. And he said it didn't feel right at that point. So he said he needed to speak up, and they shut him down and put Dylan Cruz in to finish that game. So they'll know more when they get that MRI. It's a little bit of a cause of concern there, because with any kind of hitter, it doesn't take much when you pull one of those side oblique muscles for it to turn into something very significant. And even the minor ones can knock you out for a while, because it's one of those things that you just have to rest and can't do anything about. Obviously, the tenor of this season has changed somewhat over the last week, but man, that would be quite the blow if they lost James Wood for any length of time. Or at this point, we just don't know, but I think you have to at least brace yourself for the possibility that he might have actually hurt himself on that swing.
James Wood as the Nats starting right fielder, number one batter, 1 for 4 with a single. How about the irony of he hurts potentially his oblique, gets replaced by Dylan Cruz, who last season missed so much time due to an injured oblique. Dylan Cruz knows all about how stubborn oblique injuries can be. And yeah, I mean, that's the other thing about this Nats season, right? We've talked about this, the insanely good injury luck this team has had with position players. And if that starts to change, Katie bar the door, as the great Gorilla Monsoon used to say in the WWF back in the day, in terms of how ugly things could end up getting. One more item, and this actually came out on Sunday evening. So the Nats, as we know, are announcing roster transactions left and right, something that has been buried, and understandably so. The Nats on Sunday night announced having transferred relief pitcher P.J. Poulin to the 60-day injured list. He had been on the 15-day IL since July 19th, retroactive to July 16th due to a left flexor strain. I don't know to what extent there had been optimism that he might be back at some point relatively soon. But obviously that optimism now is out the window. P.J. Poulin, a key reliever for this team, and he's not coming back anytime soon.
No, he's not. I can't say I'm shocked by that one. When they announced flexor strain originally going on the IL, you thought, okay, that's not really a short-term kind of thing. And I don't believe he has begun throwing yet in his rehab program. So that tells you that they're really taking their time with it. If you were to ask, why didn't they just put him on the 60-day right away? You don't do that until you have to clear a 40-man spot. So they did that in order to clear a spot that they needed on Sunday after the trades were made. It is backdated, so it doesn't necessarily mean that he's out for the year in terms of the timing of it. I know there's less than 60 days to go in the season, but that clock already started when he went on the IL. But yeah, one of the few relievers who look kind of promising this year, and certainly was really good in the opener role. It doesn't look like we're going to be seeing him anytime soon, and hopefully it doesn't turn into anything more than that requires anything in the off season, any kind of surgery, and that he's, totally good to go by next year. But it is something to keep an eye on, and to point out that it didn't feel so significant in the moment, but that has been a real loss for their bullpen.
Game 2 for the Nats at the Phillies Tuesday evening at 6:40. The Nats have listed Zach Littell as their probable starting pitcher for the game. Hit us up on X at Nats_chat. You can find us on Blue Sky at Nats Chat Podcast. You can email us natschatpodcast@gmail.com. We invite you to check out our website, natschatpodcast.com, at which you can buy a Nats Chat Podcast t-shirt. All Nationals radio highlights on Nats Chat, courtesy of 106.7 The Fan. For Mark Zuckerman, I'm Al Galdi. Thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you next time on the Nats Chat Podcast.
6-5 Cardinals, bottom 7. Here's the pitch. Swing and a drive to the gap. Right center field, he's done it. Luis Garcia, welcome to New York. A 2-run homer, and the Yankees take the lead.
Well, if this isn't a script, guy was born here. His family and friends are here. His idolized Robbie Cano and Derek Jeter always wore number 2 for Derek Jeter. And look at this first game for him. This place is on its feet. As Dave just said, welcome to New York.